When I approach each season, if there's one thing I want to stay away from, that's getting repetitive. Hey, let's give a case of the week, of getting cats out of trees or helping a family get reconciled or whatnot, just one after the other. So with season 4, it's like, hey, we're going to do something totally new. It's going to be different.
This is the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast, helping filmmakers who share a Christian worldview stay in touch, informed, and inspired. Quiet on set. Rolling. Today's host is Matt Chastain.
All right, everybody, welcome to yet another episode of the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chastain. I'm going to dive right in. I got an old friend on the line right now, a name you all know and love, Mr. Jarod O'Flaherty. Jarod, thank you so much for taking some time today and getting through some technical difficulties to get this going.
Yeah. And are you going to behave today, Matt? You're going to be nice to me, or are you going off the rails?
I'll try to be nice. I do not promise behave.
Okay.
You know me better than that. Jarod and I have sat on many Zoom calls that go 3-4 hours and just had the best time. So we're gonna Jeff and Jacqueline get so mad at me when I do a Joe Rogan 3-hour episode. So I'm gonna try to keep this under 25 minutes per episode. But it's Jarod, people. I figured you'd have a response to that. You're such a you're a big famous name these days, bro.
I'm grounding myself before what's about to happen. So,
all right, look, I want to get to the big announcements, the big news from Vindication. You have a successful series. When one of your biggest challenges in life are the people giving you crap online. When's it coming out? When's it coming out? I mean, your series is really in demand. People love it. So you've already announced it, but I want to kind of go a little more into this season 4 release.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right on that. It's a good problem to have. It got to a point where I couldn't post anything on social media about Vindication because the comments would fill up with, I don't want to say hate mail, but it was, when is it coming out? Like, we're tired of teasers and pictures and behind the scene. Like, we want to know when's this thing coming out. So I basically had to quit posting anything until we knew that information, which we have it now, finally.
Why you play with my emotions, Jarod? Give me my show.
That's it, man. It's all about when's it coming out.
So when's it coming out?
So season 4 will start releasing weekly, one episode per week on March 20th, 2025.
Okay, and platforms.
We've got 2 platforms for season 4. Angel Studios has jumped on board with Vindication. We think they became Vindies. Their people took a look at it and said this needs to be on Angel. So they're releasing seasons 1 through 3 this month here in February for all the audience, for all their people, their guild members to get caught up on the show. And then season 4 launches on the 20th there. And I think we're going to do some live streams, some feedback with the cast and creators and those sort of things alongside them. And then Redeem TV, who have been our partners since the beginning, they also will have those episodic releases on their service for their donors. So they have I think it's called Redeem 316, something like that, that if you're a donor, you'll get access as they come out each week as well.
I would also encourage everyone to be both a donor to Redeem and a guild member to Angel. Just support all these platforms that are supporting, good family Christian content for sure. Angel, I'm hearing, is really in an acquisition phase. They are really filling up that platform, but I've heard from a distributor I know pretty well that they're not just taking anything and everything. They are being very selective to bring in only the highest quality content. So if you get chosen for their platform, obviously that says a lot about what you're doing, which is not a huge surprise to the Vindies out there who have watched, seasons 1 through 3 of Vindication. I mean, you guys, I'm blown away at what you're able to do. And I know people listening to this, if you're not in production yourself, it's hard to really appreciate what Jarod is able to do because you probably don't even know all the hats he wears. So Jarod, I want to know more about everything you're doing in the process, all the hats you have to wear, including that Tim Pool beanie you have on right now.
That nobody can see.
Nobody can see. I'm telling them all about it.
Yeah, it's actually a Legend of Zelda beanie. That's what every, 42-year-old man needs to wear is Nintendo video game apparel. Anyway, so season 4 will be the first season in Vindication that I actually wrote all 8 episodes. It'll be the first time that has happened. And then, yeah, write, direct. I'm editor. I've edited every episode of Vindication that we have done. Post-production manager. So I didn't really set aside budget for visual effects other than one scene, but the visual effects all throughout, I'm jumping into After Effects and creating those. And it's probably a big list. I'm the accountant. So right now, like I just finished all the 1099s that had to go out for all the people we worked with. And so anyway, and the list would probably go on and on of different hats. And for me, it's not about wanting control or wanting to just keep all those hats on. It's like, if we've got some money, let's have it end up on the screen. So if there's anything that I can do or know how to do, let me do that. And so that way the money we spend can end up in the final product. And so maybe that's part of what you said, how you're really impressed by what the final product looks like with Vindication, based on what we're working with. And that's a lot of it's like every dollar, let's have it end up on the screen.
Well, yes, as one of those writers who you fired, I'm still impressed with what you did. I did get to write for Vindication a little bit, but Jarod told me that I was too vulgar, that he didn't need to include animation mixed in like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He said I was going off the rail. None of that's true. I did write for you, but...
depending on perspective, whether someone was fired or quit, it's hard to know exactly what happened. I didn't know if we were going to unpack that. That's kind of been left unresolved. So we're going to unpack that in front of an audience.
Yes, I think that makes for more interesting, because Jarod and I we never stopped loving each other. We would always comment on each other's social media posts. What happened, y'all, was this. I think I'd written an episode or two, and he's right. He didn't fire me. Jarod's too nice to do that. But my world had gotten very, very busy because it was political season, and I do a lot in campaigns. And I kept writing and sending him a draft, and I just wasn't nailing what he was wanting. And finally, as us sensitive writers do, we get all sensitive, and I'm like, I don't think I can give you what you want. You just got to take it back. I'm sorry, and all down on myself. So that was kind of my perspective of what happened, and maybe yours is different.
Well, I will say in Matt's defense, he kind of had a moving target, because he would work on this episode, come back to me, I go, well, we don't have access to that location anymore, so you can't use that. Oh, okay. Then he'd come back and he'd have this big, massive, beautiful monologue, like the climax of the episode, and I'd come back and say, that's actually one of our weakest actors that we have. I don't think we want to give it. So, there was a lot of back and forth. And that's part of where I talk about me having written all of the episodes of season 4. It wasn't because, I want my pen there. It's because I know all of those little nuances,
right,
and can make them happen, and know what things are going to cost us a lot, what things can give us the most production value for the limited time. And what has happened, because I have worked with a number of other writers throughout the seasons, and it typically gets to the end, and they always bring their own flavor to the episode that I never would have done. And that always, I think, is great for audiences to get that new, something that's fresh. But time-wise, when we're always working on a condensed schedule, I get to the end, and for the number of, like you mentioned, our 3-hour Zooms and the back and forth and the drafts, I get to the end and go, if I had just written this myself,
I could just do it myself.
We could have been done 2 weeks earlier,
Yeah.
instead of all this back and forth. And so
Yeah.
that was really the reason in season 4 of, hey, I'm just going to take the reins on this and do it all. Now, whether people come back and say it was the best season ever or the worst, we'll let the audience decide. But
well, your writing is brilliant. There's no doubt about that. And people don't understand the back and forth that you go through. Typically, when the entire studio isn't condensed into one genius named Jarod O'Flaherty, there's a lot of back and forth and conflict between the showrunner and the writers and the producer and the director, and they're all pulling in different directions. And it can be very difficult, certainly for a writer, but even for the director to understand all the nuances of production. And so when you are the producer and you're able to write just instinctively within all the nuances of the production limitations that you have, it does make it a whole lot more efficient. So I 100% get that.
If you want a practical example of something that happened along those lines, for season 2, for the final 4 episodes, I think I may have written one of them. But anyway, we had other writers involved. And I had this storyline of the city manager, who was played by Rabia Scott, that she starts, coming on to Travis, that she starts expressing interest, even though he was married and she was going through a divorce. And all the writers that I was working with, the 3, and you were one of them, all 3, I kept pitching that storyline and nobody wanted it. Like, no, I don't want to do it. That doesn't fit in my episode. Maybe the other writer can do it. Talk to the other, I don't want to do that. No, I don't like that. So what happens at the beginning of season 3 when Jared's writing an episode, that storyline kind of gets shoehorned in,
It
and
pops in.
I look back and is that one of my favorite? Like, oh, that was brilliant. I'm glad I did that. I mean, nobody has pointed out as like a low spot or jumping the shark, but I look back and go, maybe I tried to force that a little bit too much, that it didn't need to be there. Now, it certainly serves a purpose in the overall story and all that, but that's just a practical example, like you said, between writers and filmmakers of going
Oh,
back
yeah.
and forth that I like, oh, yeah, we got to put this in, that's why I introduced this character and nobody wanted to touch that one. So
For me, that was very much. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of when they were writing The Office and they wanted to write in the plot line that Jim cheated on Pam by kissing some coworker, and the actor John Krasinski refused. He wouldn't shoot it. He said, I'm protective over this character. Our audience loves these characters, and I can't. And so he just refused. And so they wrote it to where he, found a way to kind of get around it to where he wasn't cheating on his wife. And I think that might be, we all love those two characters so much that we couldn't have Mr. Todd, Miss Peggy's character getting
go
too
through
close to
that. Yeah.
I wrote an episode where they flirted with each other because we don't see enough of that. It's okay for married people to actually have a romantic and flirty relationship. So that's what I tried to incorporate into the one episode that I enjoyed the most.
Yeah. And to go back to the whole fired or quit, back and forth. The episode you did write in season 2 is one that still can, and it will when it comes out on Angel, gets lots of compliments of people. They love the camping trip, the hunting trip, just that getaway from the day-to-day and all the things that happen there that I never would have written. I wouldn't have thought of that. And that was, I think you were given kind of a clean slate on that. You had some room there to work and create those things. So it definitely worked out, and people still point to it as a favorite episode.
When we put together the meetups, we wanted to be very strategic with the approach, thinking about the obstacles. Where are those things that would actually make the greatest impact?
I just wanted to say thank you, Jacqueline. You guys having everything so organized. I went on the website last week. I was able to sign up. All the instructions worked. Everything was seamless. And I have not had an experience where it's been this seamless ever. Also, I've already met some amazing people on this. And I love the format. You teach us a little bit, and then we go into a separate group with just a few people. It takes away some of the anxiety if anybody has anxiety about speaking in a large group. And also, I've gotten to really know people beyond just that's your name and your face. And some people I knew already, which is also great because there's so many people here from the industry that just have amazing experience in all areas. I've met writers, I've met actors, I've met producers. Today, I was with somebody in a room who actually does editing, and that was such a great perspective.
Join us on Thursday mornings for our FAF Association meetings. We've got networking opportunities, masterminds, and more. Find the schedule on our homepage at faffassociation.com or find the link in our show notes.
Well, you've built such a great world, and the characters are really, really fun to play with. And I can't wait to see season 4, kind of moving on into that. Man, the trailer, I was just, because I'm a sucker for gangster shows and shows that probably are not necessarily the most fitting of a Christian audience, just because I love the exploration of power dynamics. And it seemed like in season 2 and into 3, we were dealing certainly with crime. But now it seems like, if I'm reading it correctly, season 4, we're getting into some more high-level power dynamics that he's got to deal with. And that's fascinating to me. We're going straight gangster here.
When I approach each season, if there's one thing I want to stay away from, that's getting repetitive. Hey, let's give a case of the week, of getting cats out of trees or, helping a family get reconciled or whatnot, just one after the other. So, with season 4, it's like, hey, we're going to do something totally new. It's going to be different. And so, yeah, the stakes do get elevated. Now, you run the risk, I think, as a storyteller or filmmaker, of trying to make it look too big when you're in a small world, especially if you don't have that big budget, right? And so I was very careful with that I feel like in the end it didn't get too big and seem too gigantic, where people are talking about, oh, there's riots all over the country. And then you see a scene, it's like 3 people with signs. And you're going, that doesn't feel big enough. So we keep it small with Travis and some of his core people, but there are definitely different stakes, but bigger stakes beyond it.
That's very clear in the trailer. Another thing is clear in the trailer. Look, I've always thought ever since your pilot episode that from a sheer production standpoint, you more than maximize your budget. It looks like a real grown-up movie. But I would say somehow in season 4, it looks like you've even elevated the production more than you had in seasons 1 through 3.
Yeah, I mean that's a nice compliment. I think back, what did we do differently? What did we change? Maybe it's just growing and learning more,
Just getting better at it.
yeah. I mean, our cinematographer, sound team are people that do this all year round. It's not like hobbyists or anything, so they're good at what they do. But even Ron Gonzalez, who's our cinematographer, he came in and said, "Hey, I'm gonna try a few different things this season. Some stuff that I've picked up that I want to try, and that may play into it." We were using the same cameras and same lenses as seasons 2 and 3. So
What are you shooting on camera-wise?
so we shoot on Blackmagic. Well, actually, I think it was a Blackmagic Pocket, like Pocket Cinema camera or something, and then some anamorphic lenses. So Ron, again, to mention him, he's always come to me and I say, "Hey, do we need to like invest to get an Alexa, or do we need to go, upgrade and all this?" And his thought is, I can get 98% of the image out of this budget camera as you can get out of those. Now, sure, there's some room there, but you're going to spend so much and the time just to manage them. This is the Blackmagic's a small camera. You can plug it in, we can go. Whereas you get some of those fancier systems, there's more prep time, building out the camera, those sort of things.
Yep.
So I've always stuck with his advice, his expertise on that. And, as you're saying here, it looks really good. So,
Well, you give a great DP. You could give a great DP an iPhone, and they'll get you something beautiful out of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's less about the cameras. But that's actually good news for a lot of people to hear, because something like a Blackmagic Pocket is very accessible to most people kind of climbing the ladder of production. Very accessible to you. Now, the lens and all the other things you build around it are sometimes more difficult. You got to rent those anamorphic lenses, and gosh, I know DPs love that look of the anamorphic lens. But it makes it more accessible, and it should show you that it's not just the budget behind it; it's the knowledge and the experience going into that budget that really maximizes it.
yeah. And for you to say like, "Oh, season 4 looks so much better," but yet we're using most of the same people and same equipment, it's that knowledge, that experience of knowing, and that can even start in the writing. When I'm writing a scene that I go, "Hey, I know I can write this and it'll look really good." And if we want to get a lot of extras to add that production value, well, let's sprinkle that in throughout the season instead of, you may have a writer that isn't aware of it and they write 4 scenes in the first episode that all have 50 extras, and you're going, that's on a production, it's too much overhead to manage all of that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think I've actually, now that I've boiled it down, I know what it is. I think mostly it's that Todd Terry grew his hair out.
Yeah.
That's really what makes
He
it look
looks
better.
more like a woodsman now, so that
Yeah, he does. What was that? Is that Todd Terry, the actor, wanting to grow his hair out, or did you think Travis, the character, needed longer hair?
Well, I'll give you 2 scenarios, and you can pick which of these you think happened. Now, I,
Okay.
as a visionary filmmaker, called Todd and said, "Todd, as I look ahead to season 4, I really feel like Travis has progressed to a point where he's got longer hair, more scruffy face, and so
Yeah.
we're going to push in that direction to match my creative vision." That's option 1. Or Todd Terry called me and said, "Hey, Jarod, I'm going to start growing out my hair and beard to try to go for some different roles. Is that going to be a problem with Vindication?" And I said, "No, sir, we'll do whatever you want." So it's probably one of those 2 things that happened.
I think it was definitely one. I think you called him and said, "What if Travis grows his hair out to match my vision? And Todd, I think that would help your career." And he said, "Yes, Mr. O'Flaherty, I agree with you totally. And so does my agent."
Yeah, if you want to go with that one, then we'll leave it undefined of
Undefined.
what happened.
I'll get Todd Terry on this podcast, and we'll get his perspective on it for sure. So that's really exciting. Season 4 is coming up. Is it going to be where they just release them all at once, or is it going to be one release per week?
It's going to be the weekly release, And I know for a few years, with the whole Netflix and binge watching kind of became the thing to sit down and just watch it all. I actually kind of like the one per week because you get time for everyone to get to the same spot. Everyone can catch up.
Yeah.
You can let it simmer for a little while if there's a cliffhanger, like we like to do some of those. So there's more time to talk about it and just savor it. Whereas the binge watch, you'll have people that in the first 4 hours that it's out have watched the whole thing, and then
And posted about it online.
and they post it and they're going, "When season 5? When season 5?" Other people, it takes them 2 weeks to even watch the first. So with this, I think you can keep people at the same spot. There's the excitement and all that. And instead of it being a 1 weekend event, it turns into 8 weeks of the episodes being
I
released.
think that's very, very smart. It makes me as a viewer want it more. I mean, I'm doing that right now with the Beast games. Me and my kids are just every Thursday we race home to watch Beast games, the Mr. Beast game show.
Yeah.
He could have, and frustrated that he didn't release them all at once. But I'm sure the discussion within the Mr. Beast headquarters was exactly as you just described. So I think that's, from your perspective, a whole lot smarter, and it's one of those delayed gratification things that we all need to do better at. So I'm totally behind you there. So we're going to keep these episodes a little shorter because, again, I could go 4 hours with you. But if you don't mind, I'd like to tease the next episode of Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast by talking about the next step for Vindication, because there was an announcement back in November that teased something even after season 4, and we really need to kind of go into that.
Yeah,
so let's do that on
absolutely.
the next episode. What do you say?
Sounds great.
Thanks for listening to the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. If you've been enjoying this podcast, take a moment to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to support the production of this podcast, you can leave a tip at faffpodcast.com/support. Bringing filmmakers together for faith and family.